but hi. I'm sure you're saying hi to me.
Yeah.
And to us.
Okay. So how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Mm-hmm.
Karibu, karibu.
Asante.
Fantastic.
Asante sana.
Good. We're very proud that we came to the meeting before you.
Yeah, yeah. You people are good timekeepers. That's how Kenyans are.
And when you beat a Dane to it, we have something to be proud of.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well done. Goody.
Bent, how are you?
I'm fine, Trevor. How are you?
It's good to see you. The last time we spoke, I think it was just on text.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
But you still have a face. That's good.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Yeah.
So we're about to begin. I think we'll just give the rest of the team about 4 minutes or so, and then we'll just start the conversation.
Sawa kabisa.
Yes. Ricky, how are you? You know, I wasn't going to mention the name because I'm not sure if I get the pronunciation right. Then I tried to read all of it and I figured I wouldn't get any of them right. So let me just risk it with Ricky.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
I haven't met anyone yet who's not a Dane who can pronounce my name. So
especially
whichever way is okay.
The last two would be Sig Hansen.
Yeah, C. Hansen.
C. Hansen.
Reggie C. Hansen.
Reggie C. Hansen.
Yes.
Awesome. Wow. Great.
Yeah, but good to see you too.
Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Reggie.
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. I don't believe we met. Have we met?
Yeah, we have. In Kenya.
Oh, yes, during the, yeah. Good, nice to see you again.
Yeah, very briefly.
I know.
Very briefly. So.
Good.
Dr. Jacob is also with us. Dr. Jacob, you're good?
Yeah, actually, I kept saying hi to him, but I think he's muted.
I think he's muted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, he's
not busy. This is technical, technical of Aiba.
Yeah.
Give me a, but I'm okay. Nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you. Dr. Jacob is actually my brother. You know, in this country, you have to anchor yourself somewhere. So I'm sure I'm safe. Dr. Am I not?
Yes, you're right.
So how many people may be watching? Would you know?
Well, so far we have at least 35 people who are participating as we speak, but when we broadcast it on YouTube live, then we can track from there the moment it kicks off. And the numbers will keep fluctuating. They'll go high, come in low, and there's also going to be real-time comments, which we will take on. So I guess it's still a bit too early to tell, but we will know at the end of it all. In the interest of time, and I'm a democratic man, I think we should just start. Do we all agree? As many as of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
All right, good. I was wondering how that would work out now that we are online, because the first thing you always ask is, can you hear me? Then by the time you're saying aye, we've moved on to the next conversation. Great. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to this international webinar on the state of multi-party democracy in Kenya today. We are asking the legitimate question, are there legitimate concerns about the future? That essentially creates the basis of this conversation. You're welcome to talk to us online as well at CMD Kenya, at Trevor Ombija. And my name is Trevor Ombija. I'll be the moderator for this session. I'll introduce my panelists real quick. Senator Bshiro Alake is with us. She's a CMD Kenya chairperson. Thank you so much for making time. We're still waiting for Ms. Karen Illman, the first Deputy Speaker, Danish Parliament. She'll join us in just a bit as well. Professor Amukowa Anangwe is also here, the founding chairperson of CMD Kenya and a political scientist. Thank you so much for making time as well. Mr. Paul Nana Kwabena, Senior Programs Officer, Ghana Center for Democratic Development, is also with us. And Mr. Francis Ayua, lawyer and democracy government expert. Before we get into the discussion, I'd like to welcome Senator Bshiro Alake, the chairperson CMD, to make welcoming remarks. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Trevor. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of all our panelists and of course our Professor Mkoa Nangwe, who is today the person that is going to present to us the state of our democracy. And of course, we expect a lot from him because he is really an authority on this, but also we have such a distinguished panel from Ricky to Brent and to all the others that are on this list, even those that are yet to join us. I'm very happy that the Center for Multiparty Democracy is convening such a high profile meeting and that it's also showing our global outlook. We are not just looking at Kenya, we are global citizens, and that the innovations in democracy and other spaces that we are going to learn from each other is going to go a long way in making sure that our democracies are stronger and more established and flourishing in our different countries. So I really thank all of you. We don't take it for granted that we're able to then tap into all of you. I know you have a lot to offer. Democracies are in different stages, as you know. Most of our African countries got independence in the 60s, and so our democracies are fairly young as well. And although we can't use that as an excuse, we are saying that there's lots to be learned from other more institutionalized democracies, and the journey that you have walked in different countries will definitely have a lot of lessons for Africa and for us as in Kenya. You know, democratic space in a lot of countries right now, especially with the backdrop of COVID, is under some sort of constriction, and therefore we would also like to learn what other countries are doing in the face of, you know, a pandemic that is global, and what effect it has. But I am really looking forward to looking at the impact of democracy and the challenges that thereof, and some of the concerns around the values of democracy. Are they being upheld or not? And so I am looking forward to a really robust and very good discussions this afternoon, which we can then take forward certain learnings or certain recommendations and execute them. Because again, it's not enough for us to just discuss things. We want to make sure that we are converting and translating these discussions and these recommendations into something for our political parties, for our countries, and also for our citizens, especially. I know democracy is about citizen participation. I look forward to hearing how that is best done, you know, and learning the different dimensions of citizen participation, especially in our country. I know democracy and ethnicity and other things that along the lines where our democratic space organizes itself and mobilizes itself would be very interesting to know. But that said, I am not going to talk too much. Professor is going to represent to us, and the rest of us will give also our perspectives from our different countries and from our different experiences. So really for me, as not the host, Trevor, you're still the host, don't worry, but as the host, so to speak, as the Center for Multiparty Democracy, I welcome you and look forward to engaging you now and even after this webinar, with a view to ensuring that we do whatever it takes to make sure our democratic space is thriving, and that democracy for our countries is doing what it's supposed to do. Give us a chance to govern ourselves, give us a chance to participate in the socio, the economic, and other aspects of our country's systems, and to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. So with those few remarks, I would, as is usually the case, I have quite a bit to say with these kinds of things, but today is not really my day, it's our day. And especially the day of Professor Anangwe, who is actually a founding member of Center for Multiparty Democracy, and who we look up to with regards to the vision of a good democratic country, and who has a lot of experience and a lot of historical background to the democratic space in our country, but not just in our country. He's now a global citizen. He's worked in the region and will bring to the table such a diverse perspective. So, Dr. thank you very much for taking your time out, but also for continuing to serve this country and to this nation and this region and Africa and the globe. So, because I know that sometimes we have questions around what democracy means for Africa and what model of democracy would work for Africa. And today I hope we see some of these discussions come to the fore, so that then we're not just copy pasting democratic values and principles that perhaps may need a customization in our context. So I take this opportunity to welcome you all and look forward to a robust discussion and a lot of learning, both always, I'm sure, across from all the panelists, but also from our audience. I'd like to really thank the support we've got as Center for Multiparty Democracy from our political class. I know they always come whenever we've asked them to come, from our citizens who are always following what we are doing and giving us the legitimacy to continue providing them with information and and the convening powers that the Center for Multiparty Democracy has had since its inception, since 2004. And so we don't take our audiences for granted. They keep us here, and it's the reason we are here. So thank you very much, and I welcome you all.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator, for those opening remarks. And thank you to our international friends for joining in, and all the more than 50 people who are participating already. The conversation has already kicked off, and that really is the essence of this entire discussion, because it's really about you. You can also keep tweeting us at Trevor Mbija at CMD Kenya. We'll pose those questions or read your views on this particular webinar that we're having right now. So there's a reason why Professor Amukowa Anangwe is the one setting the stage for this conversation, because he has vast experience in this issue particularly. He is currently the Executive Director, Regional Center for Strategic and Policy Studies, and also a former professor of political science at the University of Dodoma in Tanzania. Previously, he taught political science at the University of Nairobi and was also a party official, a member of parliament, a cabinet minister, as well as the founding chair of the Center for Multiparty Democracy, Kenya. If that doesn't make you feel insufficient, there is more. He attended undergraduate studies in political science at the University of Nairobi, obtained a master's degree in public policy and administration from the Institute of Social Studies, Erasmus University in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, got a PhD in political science from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom, and undertook postdoctoral studies in American political system at the American University in Washington.
Whoa.
Yeah, think about that for a bit. He's the one kicking off the discussion today, and it is based on his findings on the state of the multi-party democracy in Kenya today. Are there legitimate concerns about the future? Professor.
Thank you very much, Trevor Mbija, for those nice remarks and introduction. But let the introduction not mislead you. We still have a lot to do. Let me thank Senator Bishiro for inviting me to participate in this virtual meeting. And I'm always privileged to come over. Now, I know privately the moderator has told me that I have 20 minutes. But I can readily tell you that there is a lot to be said, so that I don't look like I'm hurrying you through a rich agenda or outline. I will just mention the outline, and then thereafter we shall see where to place emphasis. For beginners, the title is The State of Multi-Party Democracy in Kenya Today. Are there legitimate concerns about the future? And we have an outline. Outline. Just outline. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay. Yes, we have an outline of several items. As you can see, objectives of the study, the problematization, conceptual framework, current state of political parties, factors that strengthen or weaken political parties, both intra and contextual factors, classification of political parties in Kenya, coalitions and their impact on multi-partyism in Kenya, summary of key issues, and we shall wind up the discussion with the best practices of multi-party democracy in terms of two broad areas, the regulatory framework for parties and improvement of the party system. Now, in an encounter of this nature, it helps to summarize the gist of the presentation and from which a more detailed discussion can ensue. This is a study, a critical study of the state of political parties in Kenya, with particular interest on the intra-party factors, as well as the contextual factors and how these factors have strengthened or weakened parties. The study has also examined the classification of parties in Kenya, as well as the coalition building processes with interest on the impacts of these and how they have contributed to or hindered multi-partyism in Kenya. Now, this particular discussion is premised on the view that there are problems with our parties in Kenya in terms of the way they are managed, and consequently they are dysfunctional, the details of which we shall share in due course. But we need to underline that indeed there are legitimate concerns about the parties in Kenya that need to be addressed. Now, going to the outline, I won't go into detail on the first and second and third item for purposes of managing time. And I was also advised that I should avoid theoretical stuff because I'm dealing with practical people who don't want to be digressed with theories. So I'll attempt to do so. But in a nutshell, the objectives of this study is to critically analyze the multi-party democracy in Kenya, and to look at the intra-party factors, to look at the contextual factors and how they have strengthened or weakened political parties. The second one is to look at the classification of parties and how these various types have strengthened or have contributed to or hindered multipartyism. We'll also look at the coalition, the evolution of coalition building in Kenya and how the processes have impacted on multi-party democracy. And finally, we shall zero in on best practices and their proposed interventions to make a difference. Now, on the aspect of problematization, I need only to highlight the fact that you undertake a study where there are problems. When things are good, you only study them for purposes of generating lessons for replication. But in the context of this particular study, yes, we have to emphasize that there are problems with parties in Kenya. Their management is problematic and they are dysfunctional in a multifaceted way. From my point of view, they are ill-suited to be building blocks for democracy. The formal structures and processes don't function according to the formal constitutions, rules and procedures. There is digression, sometimes deliberately so. Parties in a democracy are supposed to be intermediate organizations to aggregate and articulate demands between the state and the civil society and the general populace. But in the context of Kenya, sometimes the theory and practice depart, where parties are largely treated as personal fiefdoms of the key party officials. In the Kenyan parlance, parties have their owners, okay? And the other aspect, of course, of problematization is that these realities sometimes are not adequately captured in the conventional party theory, which is Eurocentric. When you review literature of Western political parties, parties are an integral part or they have grown together with the democratic movement. So sometimes it's difficult to separate between political parties and the democratic process. Elsewhere, yes, there is an attempt to follow that path, but the reality is sometimes you sit back and question to what extent are parties themselves contributing to the deepening of democracy. There are, of course, many examples when parties have been seen really to be working against the democratization process, when they are not internally managed democratically, or when they seem to be part and parcel of attempts to subvert democracy in one way or another. So there is a problem, in other words, may I emphasize. The conceptual framework is just to give us a frame of mind to navigate through the evidence and data available, to give it a meaning, to give it a structure, to be able to discuss meaningfully the issues. As one can readily see, may I say with a bit of qualifications that indeed there are political parties in Kenya, insofar as we can say that They are organized groups. They are duly registered and have political aims, one of which is to influence public policy by having candidates elected to public offices. We have democracy, and I like the way Senator Abishiro, the chair of CMD, has put it. Democracies are not the same. They are on a different, they are on a continuum and different ends. If you brought a Western observer to witness what goes on in Kenya and some of the settings in Africa, and you reflected with the hindsight of where they come from, sometimes you doubt. And that is evidenced by some of the reports that come by during the observations, international observations of elections in Africa. You see, they are hard put to pass a judgment whether elections have been free or fair. I had the experience of going through several African countries with one pertinent question to be asked to the electorate through focus group discussions. And the pertinent question was all over: are elections free and fair in your country? You'll be surprised there was unanimity, where everybody said, who participated in the discussion, that the elections in their various settings have not been free and fair. Such assertions, of course, bring to doubt on the legitimacy of the processes themselves, the ones we deem to be democratic, and yet in reality, there seem to be some deviance in that respect. But that notwithstanding, we can call our democracy in Kenya as, yes, multi-party democracy, but in a qualified way, in the sense that when we talk about multi-party democracy in Kenya, we are very specific. We are talking about the opportunity for electoral participation and the opportunity for multi-party competition amongst the parties. Let's not bring in the issues whether the elections, the processes, the environment itself is conducive to democracy. We'd get into problems. And that's why I agree with the introduction made by the chair of CMD, that these settings are at different levels. And let us accept that it's a democracy, but of a different kind or even degree for that matter. Okay. Now, let me zero in where it matters most for our purposes on the current state of multi-party or political parties in Kenya. We have a table that summarizes the reality. I underscore by saying that there are indeed political parties. In 2013, there were 559 registered political parties. In 2017, there were 68. And in 2020, up to date, there are 71 political parties. So they are registered political parties. In 2017, there were 68 political parties, as we have said, but out of these, only 41 participated in the elections. So you have a percentage, say 40%, 40% that did not. 40% did not. That is a significant number. So you have parties that are registered with a view to participating in elections, but 40% don't participate at all. Now, for those that have chosen to participate, they are at different levels. In 2017, only 8 had presidential candidates, that is 22%. For gubernatorial or governorships, only 7 managed to secure elected governors, that is 17%. For parliament, only 21 parties managed to have MPs. That is 51%. 51%, okay, of those that opted to have candidates. And in terms of county assemblies are at the subnational level. Here in Kenya, we have counties, we have county levels and national level, and county levels of county assemblies. These are elected representatives. Of those, all of them had candidates and they managed to secure at least one seat. That is 100%. In 2013, for purposes of contrasting, a similar picture, presidential candidates, the parties, only 8 offered candidates, that is 13.5%. In terms of parliamentary, of course, they had governorships. Governorships missing. Yes, governorships was missing. But that notwithstanding, parliamentary, they had there were 21 parties that secured the seats, participated and secured seats, at least one seat, and that is 36%. In county assemblies in 2013, 46 of them participated. And of course, 46 was just 78%. So in other words, the general picture that one can see that very few parties participate in the presidential and gubernatorial seats races. When it comes to the national level of all these parties, only 60 to 70% are inconsequential. As high as 60 to 70% are inconsequential at the national level. 60 to 70, that is a huge number. So in other words, we have registered parties, but 60 to 70% don't participate at the national level. That is an issue by itself. So why have so many parties that don't participate at the national level? They are irrelevant as it were. As witnessed in 2017, one party, there was of course one party and a coalition of parties, 2 of them. Two parties, the one party and the coalition, of course, which won the election, controlled about 73% of the seats in 2017, and 68% in 2013, and 68% in 2013. In other words, the Kenya legislature is dominated by usually 2 parties, or either one party on one side and a coalition of parties on the other. That has obliged me sometimes to use the two-party system in the legislature in a restricted sense. I know a two-party system ordinarily is when two parties alternate in power, like in the Ghanaian case. This time round, it's one party, next election is another party, and so forth. But I'm using a two-party system in a restricted sense in the legislature. And that is a pattern that has emerged in Kenya. In 2017, two parties dominated. In 2013, it was the same. These other parties, the majority of them tend to be passengers, as they do. They tend to be passengers. They tend to be passengers. But of course, the story is different from the subnational level. Now, what factors have strengthened or weakened parties? Yes, there are inter-party factors. Party institutionalization, we have already said what that process is. It's a process through which parties get established and acquire stability and value as political actors. And it is often measured in terms of the age of the party, electoral stability. In other words, it participates regularly in elections. Legislative stability, yes, in the sense that it is regularly represented in parliament, and the ability of the party to outlive its changing leadership. In the Kenyan case, we have a phenomenon where when a leader exits the political scene, of course, the party ceases to exist, or it will atrophy, exist in a weakened form, for that matter. The other factor is, of course, social political support, a basis upon which parties are formed. Yes, some parties, many parties lack that social political base to the extent that it is not clear what interests, particular interests, they represent, or what particular social cleavages they seem to represent or to express. The other factor internal is party organization and structure. This refers to the spatial or geographical organization and the differentiation of structures for participation in the various organs and how they are coordinated for the membership. There is a problem here. Yes, they exist on paper, they exist in constitutions, but in terms of the actual manifestation and the involvement of membership, it is lacking to the extent that there is a disconnect between the party leadership and the membership. The other factors are, of course, external or contextual, because of time is running out. These factors include the environment and the constraints and opportunities that these environments generate. The environment has several factors. One set is the political and security environmental factors. These are the non-legal factors. The other set of factors has to do with the constitutional and legal environment, what the Constitution provides in terms of the role of political parties. In the Kenyan case, it is true, the Constitution does provide for parties. So parties exist as a constitutional creation There are also laws. There is the Political Parties Act that does regulate political parties. That the challenge is the enforcement of some of the provisions. The other aspect of the context of political parties is the electoral system. The electoral system is crucial. Where an electoral system refers to the method of translating votes or translating votes into seats. And of course, the electoral system does determine the rules of competition amongst the parties. Some electoral systems would be conducive, as we shall review in the course of time. Yes, parties in Kenya can be classified based on different considerations. One consideration is having a stake in government, either as a ruling party or not having, so that to become the opposition party. That is one consideration upon which parties can be categorized. The other consideration is parliamentary presence. Parliament is the citadel of political power and representation. It's supposed to be the supreme organ and the representative of the sovereignty of the people. So when a political party is missing there, it is missing in action. It's missing action. It's also one area, one consideration. Size of parties, some parties are small, others are large, and that is important. Large parties hold sway over the political system. As I've already mentioned, Parliament is dominated by two parties, and that is also reflected on the size of those particular parties. Another one is ideology. Ideology can also be used to categorize parties. Some parties have ideologies, nuanced ideologies that are ethnic, but smaller parties don't stand to benefit so much because either they don't represent any ethnic group or their bases are narrow. Now, coalitions is also another aspect that we need to consider in terms of benefits, positive and negative impacts. And for our purposes, let me say that there are positive aspects for management of time. There are positive aspects. But may I also highlight that there are more negative aspects of coalitions, especially in Kenya. One, they weaken the ideological basis of political parties. They compromise individual party platforms. They deny the electorate the opportunity to choose from competing alternatives. From the Kenyan experience, there have been a recipe for unstable governments. They undermine the principle of separation of powers in the presidential system. And by and large, they weaken the political parties that are engaged in coalition arrangements. In summary, there are key issues that I have highlighted in the paper. One is the continued existence of inactive and non-parliamentary parties. That has to be revisited and a solution found. There is a high turnover and short shelf life of major parties. Parties have very weak organizational structures and communication processes. There is poor enforcement of the laws, and as such, many parties are deviants. The electoral system is flawed. The first past the post doesn't afford parties to grow, to be vibrant. There is also the illicit behavior of an official opposition party going to bed with government and abandoning their former role as an opposition party. So that is a deviant behavior and it is undemocratic. It undermines democratization. There is a deficient legal framework to manage coalition arrangements. There's a need to make the the party system in Kenya genuinely multi-party, in the sense that the many registered parties should matter instead of just two dominating the scene. Unlike other places in the region, Kenyan party, no single party is hegemonic. If you compare, say, with Tanzania, you have CCM. If you went to Uganda, you have URM, okay? If you went to, say, Rwanda Patriotic Front, and so is South Africa, you have ANC. That phenomenon is missing. The mere fact that they exist in other settings, there is a utility aspect of it that should be examined. Parties in Kenya lack really viable sociopolitical constituencies, and that may partly explain why they are not viable. They keep on disappearing. Parties in Kenya lack party cohesion. Factionalism is rampant. There's lack of explicit party ideologies. And in the general environment, we seem to condone this malpractice in parties. And one explanation that there is a weak democratic and civic culture. I am told that I should wind up. The last part of my presentation has to do with the best practices in response to those weaknesses or shortcomings that I have already highlighted above. They are in two sets, while they relate to the regulatory framework of parties and as well as how to strengthen the party system. I hope, I'm told that time is up. I hope that the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, will be able to capture these. Thank you very much.
Professor Mukowa Anangwe, thank you so much for that conclusive presentation. If we were meeting in person, we would have clapped for you, but now you see online, we don't even know how to do it. There's even no standing ovation. Thank you so much for that. And I want to recognize the presence now of Ms. Karen Elman, the first Deputy Speaker, Danish Parliament. She's joining us now. And Ms. Karen, I'll actually give you the first opportunity to talk about this as we start this discussion. I see all of you who have joined us online as well, more than 70 number going into 80. Please keep your views coming on the comments section. I will read some of them. The state of multi-party democracy in Kenya today. Are there legitimate concerns about the future? Ms. Elman, now the question really is what is your assessment of the state of multi-party democracy in Kenya today from outside looking in?
Well, to start with, let me be frank and thank you very much for this very, very thorough presentation with all the very important findings. I find it extremely interesting and of course also extremely challenging with all these parties, with probably, as you also stated, a lack of several issues, not only, you know, one issue that makes us a political party. So when I look from the outside, I see a democracy that is so strong in the will to become in all aspects, well-functioning democracy, and also a country very much aware of the challenges and all the tasks to actually deal with. And to my perspective, I think it's extremely important to kind of take away this urge to actually create a political party, because of course we can take a discussion of should we set up other sets of rules dealing with how do you actually create a political party. I mean, creating a political party is also the will of different subjects, and that's the will and an interest of our society, which we should not take away from the people actually creating the political parties. But of course, the whole discussion about how do you actually create the right framework, how do you create the right incentives to actually be established as a political party with all the organization regarding a well-functioning political party, a party that could rule and take responsibility, and also taking responsibility as an opposition. That's for me always an interesting question in any democracy. And I can assure you that these are also topics in Denmark, where we constantly debate how do we actually make the framework? How do we make the right incentives to actually create a well-functioning political party? So let that be just, you know, some takedowns, but thank you very much for the initiative, and I'm looking very much forward to the debate.
Yeah, let's dig deeper slightly that into the options that you're looking at when you are trying to get the well-functioning political parties, Ms. Illman. What options are you looking at? We could steal some of them even now.
Well, first of all, what is the funding? Where does the money come from to actually create a political party? What kind of framework is set up nationally? Because is there the access to you know, public support to actually run in a professional organization like a political party? The model we use is that you get some kind of public funding for the number of members that are actively working within the political party. But we also set up, you know, some standards. Only get that kind of funding if you are actually represented in parliament. So it's not just, you know, a free lunch and we run a party and then we get a lot of money. It doesn't work like that. You are you know, it's quite easy to actually become a political party, but it's not easy to be represented in parliament or in local communities. So that's where the funding lies, and that's where the I mean, something that should actually drive forward the incentive of being a serious political party, not only with one topic, but with a whole variety of topics within the political program. So that's that should be some of the ways forward, that you cannot run and only be elected with one simple topic.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's bring in Mr. Paul Nana Kwabena. Mr. Paul Nana Kwabena is a Senior Programs Officer at Ghana Center for Democratic Development. Mr. Paul, now, how do we ensure that we have well-functioning party systems in Kenya to foster democracy? And from where you stand, how do we compare to Ghana?
Yes, thank you very much. And let me throw my way to the kudos that I've been sharing on Prof. I mean, this is a thorough research. I always say that Africans have got similar problems and challenges, and if there are positives, it cuts across. When Prof was presenting, I thought he was presenting about Ghana, and everything seemed to be working here. So let me say, firstly, as earlier contributor said, legal framework from which we sit political party, not just formulation of parties, but organization and arrangements is very much important. And so the Prof had it right there, and it's okay. But Ghana, we seem to have a challenge more that goes beyond what Prof just mentioned. Is we have the legal framework, and as Prof was presenting, I was just reading our constitution, what it provides over there. It gives.
Sorry, we seem to have lost your sound. Mr. Paul, you're on mute now. Kindly unmute.
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry.
There, you're back.
That says that even political parties can never be formed on sectional or regional lines. But that provision is there, and most of the violence that we have around our elections are sometimes based on ethnic statements that political leadership make here. So yes, we had a legal framework, but enforcement in Ghana has been a problem. There's a beautiful legal provision that political parties should submit their audited accounts, financial accounts, to the Electoral Commission every year. And as I speak, over 2 years, we don't even have. They do a shamble accounts to the extent that you don't even know what they provide in there. And all these things have got impact on governance after elections. That's why the provisions is there. So yes, the legal frameworks are there. It makes a multi-party democracy. And the beautiful thing is that the citizens themselves also support multi-party democracy. In fact, when you take Afrobarometer survey, the latest round, more than 70% of Ghanaians support multi-party democracy, even though they also say that they are not getting the benefits of democracy, the dividends of democracy, they are not getting. But even that, they still support multi-party democracy. Civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations do support all political process to the extent that some civil society organizations provide external training for political parties. As I speak to you now, through the help of DIPD, I'm training 30 party youth leaders in Kumasi. As I speak to you, they are in the conference room now on coexistence and how to mobilize and create a platform to solve problems among themselves before they degenerate into violence. So all these things are there, but critically, Ghana's politics, as Prof also did mention, has become a duopolity. It hovers around only two political parties. So you see more and more the third parties dying. So in fact, the present parliament, we don't have any third party representation. It's the National Democratic Congress and the National New Patriotic Party. And these are the two parties that have alternated power since we came to power. And then my last bit was funding. Ghana's politics, like Kenya and every other country, is becoming more expensive. And in fact, again, CDD Ghana, the Westminster Foundation conducted a research in 2018. And before a parliamentary candidate goes through intra-party contest and contests in the national election for his constituency, average amount spent $85,000. That's the account of the research. Just last 3 days, the Electoral Commission of Ghana announced the filing fee for presidential candidates to contest in the December 7 elections. And each candidate is supposed to pay 100,000 Ghana cedis, translated into about $20,000. This is the kind of politics we are running in Africa, in the country. I wasn't surprised at all that in 2017, the ECONEC, the Economic Commission, Electoral Commission of Africa, met to discuss this challenge. So these are the brief things that we are coming. Yes, the legal frameworks are there. We have support from international and local communities, but the arrangements and enforcements are not being met.
Okay. I'll come back to you and also get a bit more solutions from where we stand now. Senator Mshiro, let me bring you in on this. And Professor also alluded to it, and Mr. Paul has also spoken about it. Prof called it ethnicization of electoral politics. So how then do we draw a balance, especially when our politics itself in this country is based on the numbers? And we have the numbers categorized in tribes.
Thank you, Trevor. You know, this numbers thing is overrated. There's no one tribe that has enough numbers. In fact, of the 42 or thereabout tribes in this country, Trevor and team, is that 35 tribes have only 8%, 35, the bulk of it is just, small groups actually, including, Kenyan Europeans and the 44th tribe, the Indians. So there's 5 tribes that have big numbers, but even them, they're very close to each other if you really have followed the numbers well. So as much as, yes, the numbers are there, there's need for the smaller groups then to come in for any numbers to make any sense, to be very honest. But I think the ethnicization of our politics and our democracy has got to do a lot with resources even than anything else. At independence, our independence constitution was changed to give so much power to the executive. And then the executive was able to use resources ethnically, so to speak, or from the regions that the executive was coming from. So that then started to become the nexus between resources and political power, became the ethnicization of our democracy, I think. Again, I know, just looking at even the recent discussion on revenue, one of the things I have come to realize myself as I read about this is that, of course, then the our regions are ethnic as well. Even our counties, if you see, very ethnically organized, and the ethno-regions also have a bearing on lack of resources. And so, as much as ethnicity is an issue, it is its linkage to the power and then the accruing of economic benefits from the power that is really the problem than just the ethnicity per se. So I think I don't know from where I sit, both our ethnic, yes, our ethnicity is a factor, yeah. But the negative aspect is actually the nexus between political power and then, of course, Trevor, is that our electoral system, Constitution 2010, yeah, used a lot of checks and balances on that. So if we actually implement our constitution as it is designed and as it is framed today, I think a lot of the issues we see with ethnic politics would not be the issue. Okay. But the electoral system was not touched much by our Constitution 2010. Constitution 2010 took care of a lot of things: public participation, marginalization, devolution, people-driven states where, the sovereignty of the people. It took care and a robust Bill of Rights. But one thing that was not really focused on from where I sit is the electoral system by the Constitution. So if there's any change to our Constitution as we speak, the only acceptable thing that should be looked at is how to improve on the electoral system and make sure that the first past the post, which is basically the winner take it all, or the simple majority, where even if there are 100,000 people in a constituency, the person with maybe what 50,000 or 40,000 or 30,000, who is the one that got more than everybody else, even if the collective is much more, is the one that becomes the representative of the people. And therefore, looking at maybe mixed member representation and things like this might look into the whole issue of ethnic diversity and even women, so to speak.
Okay. Let me bring in Mr. Francis Ayo, who's a lawyer and a democracy and governance expert. Francis, now, Prof has just given us a very elaborate system of what's really going on in a presentation. There are 70% of registered parties are irrelevant at the national level. How does that impact on democracy? And does the will of the people really matter if you don't belong to a majority party?
Thank you, Trevor. I think before I say what I need to say in response to your question, let me also say how grateful I am to listen to Professor Nangwe. He taught me principles of development and its applications, so it's always great to re-engage with him. And I think, like everybody else, I think the presentation was really great. I think one of the things that we need to realize, and which is going to be the backdrop against which I make the comments that I want to make, is that we are dealing here with institutions that we imported from elsewhere. So I think we need to be kind to ourselves and also remember that
we seem to have lost you there.
There are things that we will have to do, institutions that we can. Sorry, Trevor?
No, now you're back. You're back. All right, go ahead.
Good. Yeah, so there are things that we will have to do in order to panel beat these political parties into institutions that can work in our context. And we've got a lot to be grateful for. I mean, I was just telling one of my young nephews that there was a time in this country when registering a different political party other than KANU was a crime. Yeah. So even as we talk about what's not working, there's quite a raft of things that I have jotted down. I'll be sending this to Prof because I think these conversations continue beyond this conversation that we need to be worried about. And there are also things that we shouldn't be worried about because they are just in what I call the ordinary ebb and flow of politics. So even as a lawyer, I'm usually the first to say we need to be careful about how much social engineering we can attribute to the law, because it seems with the many years of legal and political reform in this country, we've gotten to a point where every time we have a problem, we run to the law to try and change. So the direct response I have to your question, Trevor, is if you've got that many parties that are, to quote Prof, inconsequential, I think the solution isn't in the law. It is to allow them to wallow in their inconsequence until such a time that they either become consequential or they just die a natural death. So for me, that's the reason why, even as we celebrate the fact that parties are now funded from the exchequer, I hold the view that the way to utilize those resources efficiently is not to turn it into a free-for-all, where every political party gets a bite at that cherry. It should be that only consequential parties then get funded by the exchequer. You mention citizens and democracy, and I think this is how it works. And I would like to hear Prof's view on whether this is accurate in terms of political theory. The citizens who vote for the parties that are consequential are basically telling us these are the guys we take seriously. The others are also runs. So for me, that's why we should treat this as something that will develop organically through the function of politics, both what the politicians do as well as what their followers do. And not worry too much about the fact that they are there, they are on the register, and they are occupying space, and that therefore we probably should think of deregistering them and so on. In fact, I hold the contrary view that as long as they are not committing any crimes, their lack of consequence now is not permanent. In future, based on how they run their activities, based on how they institutionalize and so on, they may well end up being consequential. So their dormance now doesn't worry me from a legal standpoint. What would worry me is if they are up to no good and there are laws and systems in place to take care of those sorts of things. Thank you.
Yeah. Professor, as you stabilize, I just wanted to hear your views on your student's theory. Your student believes that the citizens who vote for those consequential parties are essentially saying these are the parties that we want. But isn't that then detrimental to multi-party democracy, Prof?
Well, the reality is citizens make choices. And as we have seen from data, in 2013, 70% or 64% were from only two parties controlled the legislatures. In 2017, the same. And it's a pattern. I also looked at the data and the evidence before 2013. That is from 1992 when multipartyism came in. A similar pattern. Now the reality is only two parties matter in the legislature and even in government when they are able to secure power. But on the other hand, the Constitution provides for freedom of association, freedom of assembly. So we need to strike a delicate balance. From my point of view, I agree with a comment made earlier about what should be done with these very many parties that don't count at the national level. I agree. And the solution I have provided is that the political marketplace should determine. If you can't survive, you perish naturally, for that matter. But when it comes to crucial funding of parties within a backdrop or against a backdrop of scarce resources, choices have to be made in order to make a difference. If I was the one funding, I would fund where it matters most. I would probably invest the bulk of the resources to those that are able to get secure seats in parliament beyond a particular threshold. These others that are not able to, they have to struggle to be able to win that particular favor. So from my point of view, if political funding is meant to reward for good performance, indeed, the focus should be on major parties. These others have to struggle to be able to secure. So I mean to respond to my student, as a lawyer, we have to strike a delicate balance between freedom of association, freedom of expression on the other, and the reality that Kenya is a two-party system. Yes.
All right. Let me bring in Ms. Karen Elman on this. Karen, talk to me about party ideology and how that can be fostered in a multi-party democracy. I see Dr. Yes, go ahead, Karen. Then I'll bring in Dr. Jacob. Dr. Jacob, just hold on 1 second. I'll bring you in right after Ms. Karen Elman. Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and let me try to be brief because it's quite a big question.
Ms. Karen, you're on mute again. Kindly unmute.
We'll try again. I think it's there.
We're
Yes.
good now.
Sorry. Let me try to be brief on this. I would say rather big question, but I think that some of the strong ideology and the strength of it is the ability to actually stay in the market, so to say, for several years, actually being able to showcase that this political party with its ideology and with its program is actually able to, for instance, make cooperation with other political parties, actually make work as a serious political party, creating results. And what we see is also a strong chain of youth politicians. We have within the very well-functioning political parties, we have a strong youth organization as well. Yeah. So getting young people involved in the democratic work within the big parties and within the very well-established, having strong youth departments, that would be some of the suggestions I see as working very well in actually making sure you have a democratic, well-functioning system.
All right. Let's bring in Dr. Jacob Hodge. Dr. Jacob, you wanted to jump into this. Kindly unmute your microphone first. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Obisha. This presentation is very important for political parties. And indeed, since we have now, my suggestion is that since now the case can allow up to 30 people to 35 people to have a meeting, I'm asking or proposing that asking for CEO, I think Frank is around there, and I hope the chair of the CLB is here, my sister. I hope this is a very fundamental discussion, which is to help political parties and also Kenyans as large. That let us have this meeting at the hotel so that people, that political parties can be invited by Secretary Generals, all those 68 68.
Yeah.
And then a professor can come and the presentation presents his papers to those political parties so that people can understand.
So we can see him very well. Maybe he can switch off his video. We see if it will stream better.
Yeah, Dr. Jacob was just making a point that this is a very important discussion, and therefore all the political parties need to be invited in a place where the Professor Amukowa can give the presentation to them and create some impact. But Dr. Haji, you can switch off your video so that we hear you much more clearly. Switch off your video and then stay on audio. Yes, Dr. Jacob.
I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes, we are still struggling, but we can hear you. The connection is not so good. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
What I'm saying is this is very important for political parties.
Yes.
It is not problem now online to talk to one another. It is very important for us to have this meeting in the hotel so that to be Secretary General of the parties to be invited with as a registrar of political party to be in that meeting. That is my suggestion, so that we can discuss this issue with the professor, come and present these papers. In fact,
thank you.
Have all those parties which they are not participated according to what they are now telling us. That is my suggestion.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob. Just kindly mute your microphone. And Senator, I'd like to bring in on this because we have a comment from one Lillian Anyango, who's one of the people who've tuned in. She says, inconsequential political parties ought to be given financial muscle to allow them do proper marketing of their institutions in order to bring on board members of the national space. As it is, parties are funded after elections, yet the inconsequential parties need funding to publicize themselves and be consequential. Is it a chicken and egg situation? Which one came first?
A good question, Lillian. I think it's both. Sometimes parties may have very good anchorage or rooting in its communities, but they're not able to really put in party structures and don't have enough resources to do so. But what I would say to Lillian is that if a party really has a good product and is self-organized well and is anchored in the community, chances are that it's easy to actually, you know, get taken seriously. But she's right. We sometimes, again, she herself has given the answer saying that it's chicken and egg. Sometimes you need to have good political parties that have a constituency. The reason why some of the political parties are not significant is because they don't have a proper constituency. If you have a constituency, for instance, and you have a social group that you represent, chances are that other political parties will take you seriously. They'll either come into coalition with you even if you don't have money because you have something to offer on the table. So I think this is one of the things that our political parties, even the smaller ones, need to think. What social group do they represent? And if they have that anchorage in their social group and that they're presenting that, it's very easy for, let's say, Jubilee Party, which needs only just a little bit top up, to come to you because you already have a constituency. So a lot of the parties that Prof has presented on have, I, for instance, as a chairperson, have tried to get these parties together with you to understanding what it is. We meeting, usually we know one person, and we say to this person, bring your team, we capacity build or we speak to them, and they would normally not take up the offer. Then somebody tells me, Senator Chana, this is the only guy in that party. So this is another issue that we find a problem with, because the party is just a one-man show or a family member and other. And when we ask them, come on board, let's look at these things, they don't take up that. And then they'll also make noise and say, why is this other party being given this opportunity? But when you say, okay, here, we'll do for you exactly what has been done for the other parties, they won't take it up. So that's where we have found a problem. But that said, I think consolidation of parties, perhaps along maybe some ideas that parties have, or certain geography that the parties have, or certain audiences, would be a good thing, and we would be supportive of making sure that if you have a good idea, it doesn't just disappear into thin air.
Okay, let me bring back Francis Ayu on this. Francis, so what do you see then as the possible solutions going forward? How do we ensure we have consequential parties, and at the same time juxtapose that for me with party ideology and the will of the people and the selfish interests of those same people who are making those political parties?
So there's a saying, I don't know whether I'm quoting it correctly, that when citizens make decisions without thinking through them, they will just have to, bear the consequences of that saying. I think there's something about sitting on hot coals. I can't remember the quotation right now. But that's essentially what we are dealing with here, ladies and gentlemen, because the way parties are organized, and Prof and the other panelists who've spoken to this are extremely right on it, is along ethno-regional lines. And we have tried in the law to even, put circumstances and qualifications there that will reduce this. But I think it still continues, even for the major parties. I mean, if you talk to people on the streets, they'll tell you this one is chiefly in this region and the other one is chiefly in that region. And maybe that's not so much a bad thing, because it's the nature of politics anywhere. So because we've got some colleagues from outside of Kenya, it might be a good thing to also hear them out on how things play elsewhere. But looking at the US, for instance, you can always tell, and this is why you have those maps where certain states are counted as the blue states and some as the red states. It follows a certain pattern, and because it's Africa here, we easily forget that that pattern in the US also bespeaks a certain ethnic pattern, because the people who are Trump's supporters, diehard supporters, come from particular regions, yeah? And the people who would rather deal with things liberally come from other regions. And we shouldn't lose sight of that because they are not called Luos, Kikuyus, or Luyas. It's just the social cleavages as they express themselves in all these other societies. So for me, the way to manage this, and I posted a comment also on this, is to just make sure that there are no barriers to those who want to enter politics. Anybody who wants to set up a political party today, subject to the requirements of the law, should be allowed to set up the political party. And anybody who wants to dissolve their party today should equally be allowed to dissolve it, so that you've got free entry and free exit. That's a very different thing from saying that therefore everybody who enters should be given some money to build their party or for whatever other reasons we find, because I find that dangerous. What we should be doing is allowing free entry, and then people should work in such a way that they perform and therefore qualify in the manner in which the law has set out for the use of public resources, because public resources in a setting such as ours are scarce. So my conversations with economists tell me that when you've got scarce resources, you've got to be careful how you apply them. And I think the threshold in the Political Parties Act, which is at least 5% of the votes in the general election, if you are really a serious party, whether those votes are coming from the people who voted for your MCAs, or whether those votes are coming from the people who voted for your other lower level candidates other than the president, you should be able to chalk up enough votes to at least say, here is 5%, and therefore we qualify. And once you've reached that threshold, those public resources will then enable you, if you run things better, to get to the level where you have a serious enough party to overturn the hegemony of the ones that are there now. So these hegemonic tendencies are something good. And I think we can see that in Prof's paper as well, that it's not necessarily a bad thing. So we should be careful about saying that multi-party democracy is about, supporting God knows how many political parties. That question has been left open by the law, and I think it's a good thing, so that it can be sorted out by the politics. So politically, if with the current arrangements, 5 parties emerge as strong parties and can access public funding, so be it. Politically as well, if only 2 emerge and are accessing public funding, I think we should generally be happy with that, because if you look at your typical 2-party system, it doesn't emerge by application of the law. It emerges organically by application of politics. And that, I think, is how we should run things on this end as well.
Okay. Let me bring in Mr. Paul Nana on this. Paul Nana from the Senior Programs Officer, Ghana Center for Democratic Development. And Paul, there's a question here from one Enoch Onkoba. He says that the problem is that most political parties are formed as special purpose vehicles, political investments in anticipation for a buyout from political demigods and bigwigs. Is that the same situation in Ghana? What is the basis of forming parties where you are?
No. Yes, it's a debate that has been waging on over the years. And that's also, I think, some of the things that form the decisions that are taken to support political parties, which of course, I have a very big problem with it. Just yesterday, there was a discussion on a radio program after the Electoral Commission announced the filing fee for presidential candidates. And the Socialist Party, represented by Mr. Kwasi Pratt, was saying it was outrageous and it's going to price out the smaller parties to be able to file their candidates. He was coming from the background that filing of nomination forms is just one of the expenses needed for an election. One other discussant of the program said that the big parties are going to pay for the smaller parties. I've been hearing this in Ghana over the years, that smaller parties are not doing well because underground, they've affiliated themselves to the two major political parties in the country. And even when they are going to do their party congresses, they are funded by the big political parties. So even in political commentary, mobilization, demonstration, you see a crop of political parties always aligned with the two major political parties when they are doing demonstration. And a big case happened in People's National Congress, the Hillary Man's party, where the general secretary and the national organizer are divided among the NDs and the MPP. And because of that, the general secretary has been suspended. So yes, these tricks are in Ghana, and the smaller parties have been subsumed by the bigger political parties, and it plays out that.
Okay. Let me bring in Ms. Elman on this. You've had this conversation going on what's happening in terms of party ideology versus the will of the people. From where you stand, what are the solutions going forward? You'd already mentioned the issue of funding. How do we then have proper functioning parties henceforth? And what should they be really based on?
Well, they should be based on the ability to actually create change, to actually make sure that they are able to make necessary framework, necessary legislation, necessary, whenever you have the relevant discussions going on, is the political party and the representatives in either the local council or in parliament, are they actually able to cooperate and to actually make good decisions? So that's of course what voters also hold them responsible for. I mean, they run a program. We try to become elected, and we give some promises to our voters that we will do this and that once elected, and then actually being held up. Were you able to actually make these results? So for me, that's core democracy and core political party work, that you're actually able to make decisions and show results, that we do change our country, we do change the world with our mandates.
And from where you stand, and this I know is very relative and subjective, should we then go almost the US way? So that if you are a bit of a liberal person, you know where you stand. If you're the Republicans, you know where you stand. The party decides for you, rather than having a system where it's free for all, open market, like the panelists are saying.
I think the party, no, I'm not saying that you should have in that matter an only two group democratic system, because of course, and we see that in the US as well, there are more details to it than just left and right. So what is extremely important to actually make multi-party democracies work is that the parties are able to actually cooperate once represented in parliament. How do you, I mean, it's strange. In my own country, it's like a speciality that we have minority governments. They can never function solely. I mean, they don't have mandates enough. Right now, we are 10 political parties represented in parliament. So of course, with a minority government, a government is always, it's always needed that the government is cooperating with the other political parties to actually be able to get the majority, and by that making the agreements and making the legislation that is expected to be more long lasting, because you have a broader perspective of mandates behind your decisions.
All right. Let's bring in Professor on this. And Prof, there's a question here that is supposed to go to Senator Lake, which I will pose to her, but I'd also like to hear your views on it from Ida Knowles. She says, is it possible to have a multi-party democracy without a political opposition and an active civil society?
That's tricky. That's tricky. To have multi-party democracy without parties, you say?
Without political opposition and an active civil
Without
society.
political opposition.
Yes.
Well, that speaks, and that sounds like a one-party system, in essence.
Yeah.
That will not be a multi-party democracy. It will not qualify. I'm sure you have seen tendencies in our environment where that has begun to emerge, where the opposition and the ruling party or coalition are on the same side, and the consequences we have seen.
Yeah.
So, but also with respect to the civil society, whether the opposition is active or not, the civil society movement should be an integral part of the democratization process. So it's not an either or. Civil societies should be in place.
Okay. Senator, that question was supposed to be yours, so I'll give you a chance to respond to it.
Thank you. I'd like to say that Ida is my little sister, and she always asks the difficult questions to me. But that said, while I agree with Prof that yes, multi-party democracy means that you have different parties with different things and holding each other accountable. But in terms of multi-party democracy meaning participation in our situation, for instance, you know, when, for instance, there was the handshake and perhaps ODM, which is supposed to be our opposition political party, sort of joined hands and sort of supported government. Other factions or other splinters within even that ruling party itself took that position. So what happens is that nothing is constant. One move creates another consequence as well. And so as much as, yes, of course, it's ideal to have a political opposition for multi-party democracy to thrive, in terms of holding accountable the government funds, they usually then emerges somebody from, let's just not shy away from using our political scenario. The minute the handshake happened, the Katanga team became the opposition party, government to account, point out what is going on. So I think my internet.
Yes, Senator, your internet is fluctuating a bit.
My internet is unstable, but
yeah,
what I see is that yes, sorry.
Try disabling your video. We'll see if it works.
I'm seeing a message on my screen.
Sorry?
Okay.
Try disabling your video so that we see
try.
if it's better.
Okay, let's try that. Sorry, my internet is a bit unstable. So.
Okay, we still seem to be having a bit of a challenge with Senator. Senator, as you sort that out, let me bring in one Ewald Gar from Ghana. Ewald Gar is a democratic governance practitioner and also a researcher there. Ewald, you had something to add on this conversation as we head towards the solution mode now, because what I'm trying to figure out at this particular point is how do we ensure that we have a well-functioning party system, whether it's multi-party or not?
Okay, yes.
Sorry.
Senator, I'll come to you in just a bit as we sort out your internet. Let me hear from Ewald Gar. Ewald, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. And I must commend for this fantastic work. And yes, I would like to say indeed there are legitimate concerns about
okay, Ewald, even
future.
You're also having a bit of internet challenges
think,
there.
All is not lost. There are some positive developments that I think we should sustain. And there's quality development that
Ewald, your internet also is fluctuating a bit. Hold that thought as
Is it okay now?
Try now. Yeah, go ahead. Let's try it. Go ahead, Ewald. Let's try if your internet is good now. You're on mute as we speak.
Yeah, so say I think all is not lost. There are some important or significant gains which I think should be sustained. For instance, the devolution in Kenya is a fantastic achievement. For us in Ghana, we've been trying to do that, I think, but we've not been successful. And as a result of that, parties are very active at the local level, though not active at the national level. And speaking to some colleagues in Kenya, I understand that as a result of this activeness of the parties at the local level, it has led to improvement in public services delivery. So this is an achievement that sustain. Number two, the issue of coalition forming. Coalition forming is not bad. It's good in some sense. In the case of Ghana, support DIP.
Okay, Ewald, we also seem to be having a bit of challenge with your internet as well.
To challenge the bigger part. And in that sense,
yeah. Ewald, kindly sort out the internet connection first so that we can hear you properly. But let me bring in Rike Hansen. You wanted to add something to this discussion. Go ahead, Rike.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the interesting debate. I just wanted to add to what Ewald was saying, because Ghana is structured in a bit different way than Kenya, where political parties are not allowed to compete at the local level in Ghana, whereas they're allowed to compete at local level in Kenya. And I also think that one should not underestimate the importance of having strongholds locally. Yeah. One of the things we're looking at in Ghana, which might also be relevant for Kenya, is to see how to support especially the smaller parties to be strong in certain districts. And then we are looking at thinking of having some kind of, if there's a trickle up effect. So if a political party can show in certain local, areas that they that they have capacity, that they can create change and so on, that then it might also help people looking at that party as being more serious, so that the focus not only at national level, but also at local level.
Okay. Thank you for that contribution. Prof, let me bring you back in onto this discussion before I come to Senator, if your internet is okay. Prof, then how then now do we ensure that the will of the people is upheld? This is the point I keep sticking to, because at the end of the day, all these political dynamics and theatrics we're talking about essentially are supposed to uphold the will of the people. How do we ensure that comes first?
Well, it's at different levels. Essentially, a party is supposed to be a member-driven organization. And to the extent that the nexus between political leadership of parties is weak vis-a-vis the members, that disconnect can really hurt the legitimacy of political parties. Yes, they may pursue the power, but when they get the power itself, how they are able to express it in terms of the will of the people can really be seriously circumscribed. So the starting point is to democratize the parties internally, from my point of view, so that members matter. Yeah. Many of the parties, if you were to ask them of their membership basis, is very weak. You know how parties are formed in this country. There is a requirement by Political Parties Act. You must have representation from several regions or counties. Some people just go to M-Pesa places, get the IDs, or some pirate other parties registered members. So we really need to improve on the management of intra-party decision-making processes. so that the people, the members have a voice in what goes on in parties in terms of who becomes the party officials. The party officials in Kenya, in many of them, they get selected. Members don't have a role to say on who becomes a party official, secretary, chairman. Now, when a party official is selected from the above, how can there be an accountability towards the members themselves? Okay, in terms of decision making over key policies, even programs for that matter, members are not involved in one way or another. Even the lower ranks of the parties themselves may not have a say. It's a top-down structure or reality in political parties. And so long as you have that particular modus operandi, parties will always not be able to represent the will of the people. So that's the starting point from where I sit.
Okay.
Even the members themselves, I think they have lost interest or hope in these parties. When elections come, they have other criteria or considerations when choosing whom to vote for. In other settings, they even say we will not look at parties, we will vote for individuals. Now, when it comes to that, parties have lost their relevance.
Yeah.
And in Kenya, increasingly, that is going to be the case. Look at the major parties. I'm sorry to pick one party, say ODM. When it first emerged in 2007, it had numerous seats. Come to the next election, 2013, it secured fewer. Okay, 2017, you know how it fared on. And I can predict with that trajectory, come 2022, only God knows how it perform. So for me, I think there's a lot to be done with the emphasis on intra-party democracy. And the second aspect is on the legal framework. Yes, there exists a legal framework that provides how parties should be registered and how they should function.
Yeah.
But the enforcement is very weak to the extent that party officials don't operate strictly according to what the framework provides. I know that Francis Ayua did say that there is no need for more laws. Legal reforms may not necessarily be the solution. But on the other, I heard from a colleague who was saying there is a need to revisit or suggest that there is a need to revisit the legal framework. My point of view is that even the law as it exists now is poorly enforced or regulated. So what value would a new law add for that matter? Mine, for purposes of ensuring that parties perform better or they are better managed, become more functional, is look at ways on how to ensure that the enforcement of the current laws is enhanced. For instance, when parties don't conform to what the laws provide, to what their constitutions provide, to what their policies provide, you need a prefect somewhere, an administrative mechanism to follow up. I know in Tanzania, for instance, there is the registrar of political parties. I have seen him in action, and actually, he makes a lot of difference. He can hold any party official or a party to account for its malpractice. I don't think that in Kenya that goes on. People are left to their own devices and mischief.
And mischief. Francis, you are coming on this conversation because you've been mentioned there, and I see you have a bit of a rebuttal that you don't have issues with the review of laws.
Yeah, so I think I may have been too brief and therefore been misunderstood. Of course, we should always live in an environment where we look at the laws we have and whether they are serving us well, and we try and see what can be changed so that it can improve. So while I would still hold my statement that there's a danger of too much law, When there's a good reason to change a law, of course, we would have to change the law. So what I am constantly rebutting, for instance, is the assertion that this money has to be freely available to everybody for us to be a multi-party democracy. I think that assertion is not correct. What we need is parties that are of consequence. And I still would like somebody, based on economic analysis, for instance, to show me why setting the threshold at 5% is a bad thing. I think 5% is fairly easy if you're a serious party. And when I look at the numbers now, I think NAC Kenya managed 4.6. If it had just gotten 0.4 more votes, it would have qualified for that. So, I mean, these are things, if you don't get in this electoral season, you chase in the next electoral season. And a multiplicity of parties is a good thing, and we should certainly be working towards it. But is it a multiplicity of 60? Or is it a multiplicity of 5? I mean, those are the things that we need to be talking about and doing our calculations. The journey of implementing our current constitution has certainly taught us that making important decisions about how public institutions are going to be run, where we are as a country, and we need to be careful about that. Prof talks about the registrar of political parties policing internal party democracy. That is something that I would support because I think the challenge, given where we are now, is the challenge of detection and enforcement, because the liberalization already happened. I don't think we will have Section 2A coming back again. But how do you regulate what is essentially a free space? Because there's a danger of going in too deep. You may actually become the problem as the regulator. And while we are on it, let's remember that it's not just the registrar of political parties. There's also the Political Parties Disputes Tribunal and how it makes decisions on questions that are brought to it by members of parties who have a complaint about how their party is being run. ORPP has a huge load. Let us be careful about overloading it with other things without asking ourselves, how are they carrying the current load? Because even with the current load, I can see the institution creaking, and adding them more in terms of a mandate had better come with more resources to then discharge that mandate. So these are questions not only for lawyers and political scientists, but also economists and everybody who can weigh in so that we see things the way they should be done, including anthropologists.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Francis. So in the interest of time, I'm going to give you each 2 minutes for closing remarks, starting with, in no particular order, Ms. Karen Illman. And you can speak to us about the role of the citizens, because I see here from the charts from the plenary session that citizens too are the problem if they keep voting for parties without the capacity to bring change. That was brought up by Francis Aywa. So just 2 minutes for your closing remarks on the role of the citizens as we wind up the discussion. Ms. Karen.
Thank you very much. I think it has been indeed a very interesting discussion, and of course, to start with, very interesting findings. And I would say the will of the public and having a democratic, educated nation, that's not something you become overnight. That's something all of us as democracies work with continuously. And I think it really starts in our elementary school. How do you actually get democratically educated so you're actually able to know what kind of responsibility you bear as the citizens in your respective country. Having said that, I find it extremely important that the political parties, when they showcase what political program they have on the agenda, what kind of changes are they working to see. I mean, it should be political parties mainly focused on the political program and not on actually combating all the other parties. So making sure that you have a political program that voters can actually give you the mandate to work forward with that political program. That would be, for me, some of the very strong issues. And of course, I mean, voters and democratic funded people are of course the strongest ones. I mean, voters are never but the will of the people is what drives us and what we should well stay focused on. So let that be my brief comment here at the end. And thank you very much for an interesting discussion here today.
All right, thank you so much. Let's bring in Mr. Paul Nana. Wabena, just your closing remarks on this discussion. Where do we go from here?
Yes.
What we need to focus on, and on the roles of the citizens as well?
Sure, thank you very much. I think, yes, the argument has been that political parties, especially smaller political parties, should show their prowess for people to aid them into the process. It's true, but I also think that some of the laws that we have in our countries also still fight against revamping the smaller political parties. For instance, in Ghana, when there's an elections and you do a filing fee, it is set in such a way that smaller political parties are unable to contest on a fair grounds. There's also a clause in the law that political parties that are able to secure 25% of the vote cast get a refund of the entire money they use to file their nomination forms. And we all agree that the smaller political party cannot compete on equal grounds when the standards are set that way. So there should be a purposive development of the law so as to also take care of the political parties in order not for them to extend entirely from the political system. Don't forget, we need a neutralizer in the political discourse. It becomes a dual politics, bipolar political parties. It becomes difficult for us to have intriguing comments and intervening mechanisms when it goes on only two political parties. So I think the laws are there, but we can tweak the law in such a way that it has a fair ground so that all political parties can compete in the basis of strength, capacity, and also financial disposition.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Francis Ayua, closing remarks?
Thank you, Trevor. I think I would agree with what has been said. Let me just do that. I think what we need in not certainly continue with these debates. And I would say the same way we've taken a long-term view of where we've come from, let's also take a long-term view of where we are going. And I completely agree with the panelists who said some of the things we want now, like having the kind of institutions that work the way we want them to work, will take time. So even if you change the law now, you need to hold in that calculus the likelihood it will this country where we have changed the law, but behavior we wanted of politicians and of other market players. Talking about industry, for instance, those things are always there, and I think we need to keep an eye on that. And then to just go back to what I said earlier, that we have a lot to celebrate. Let's build on that rather than we begin tinkering with what we have without very solid basis.
All right. Thank you for that. Professor Amukoa, your closing remarks on this?
Trevor, Mbija, I summarize key issues from my point of view as follows. There is a need to enhance the enforcement of the regulatory framework for political parties as of now, especially the Political Parties Act, so that it can really be the basis of party management and to reduce the dysfunctions in parties as they are of now. And I'm particular about what kinds of administrative mechanisms are needed and what kind of strengthening of the registrar of political parties Act office, not just in terms of the administrative aspects, but also in terms of really the resources required, even if that means having an organizational administrative structure that traverses the entire country. That is important. The second issue that I would wish to highlight as I conclude is funding of political parties. Already they are being funded by the state. Donors are coming in to fund political parties through civil society organizations. But we need to refine the criteria. Resources are scarce. And I agree with Francis that these resources should not be for everybody. These resources should be kinds of rewards to the good performers. If a party, in spite of the ground available, the legal framework, others are able to make through and others are, of course, stranded, let those who have broken the ceiling, they have registered the requisite percentages in terms of electoral strength, in terms of parliamentary strength, in terms of even age. Let us not just have one criteria. Let us have several criteria upon which funding to political parties can be made in order to make a difference and to give a signal that there is no free lunch. You have to work hard for it in terms of connecting with the electorate or the members. The third aspect or issue has to do with the electoral system. The current system in electoral system in Kenya is first past to the post, or the winners take all, okay? It has debilitating effect on smaller parties. Normally large parties have an advantage, and you can see in the case of Kenya, because they have infrastructure, they have organizational structures all over the place, they can be able to mobilize and get the votes. But the smaller parties don't have that particular benefit. In an alternative arrangement where you have, for instance, proportional representation or even mixed member representation from the experience of many other settings, where votes matter, not just constituencies alone, then the electoral strength is used as a basis to calculate representation in parliament. Smaller parties have fared better. And so I agree with what the chair of CMD did say. There may be a need, even as we talk about constitutional reforms in Kenya,
yes,
to revisit this particular system. And finally,
yes,
there is an aspect that has not been highlighted. It was just mentioned by one participant, and this is the issue of coalition building in Kenya. We have gone through it, and we have had our nasty experiences. We need a law to regulate coalition building in this country, so that things are not handled the way they have been handled, and those who engage in this particular arrangement stand to benefit, and it strengthens parties.
Okay.
I insist that under coalition arrangements, parties are underdeveloped, they weaken. Party leaders are fixated with the idea of coalition building coalitions, identifying alliances, instead of building their own individual parties so that they can compete effectively, win power.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Let me bring in Senator Bshiro Alaki, who's the chair also, for your closing remarks. I hope your internet will behave this time. There was a suggestion by Dr. Howard that we should continue with this discussion. How do we take this forward?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me, but I have posted something to say thank you to all of you, just in case you're not hearing me or I get thrown out. we don't have electricity, it seems, and I'm on hotspot that's not working very well. But let me take this opportunity. I don't even want to go into the subject or the content of the discussions today, because Prof has done it justice. You all have done it justice. We, of course, have a lot of work ahead of us to take it forward and look for ways in which we can translate some of the discussions that we have had here. But I don't believe we can have everything in one sitting. So I would like to just say thank you to all of you for your creating time so that we can look at the state of our democracy. A state of democracy in one country is a reflection of a state of democracy in many other countries. Our democracies are so interlinked in this global world that, you know, below optimal democracy in Kenya can actually have an effect on below optimal democracy in Denmark. And that such is what it is. We've seen what is happening in America at the moment. And looking and watching, we're seeing how just interconnected and how things are so similar sometimes, even in places that are so far flung. So I thank our partners, I thank our friends, I thank our colleagues, I thank everybody from around the world that has joined in, because I think the world needs global solutions so that then we can innovate from each other, we can learn from each other, we can support each other, and we can rely on the support of our friends and the rest of us. So really, for me, I don't wish to go back to these things. We are here, we can hold some of these things, but I just wanted to assure the political parties that are here that have said they would like this, professors' very good presentation given to their political parties directly. I would like to say, yes, we will do that for you. Please avail yourselves. We will definitely make sure that we're not stopping here. We're going to cascade it to the lowest levels possible to ensure that we reap the best, the best and the most benefits from what Prof has so painstakingly put a lot of effort in. So I think for me, really, I say thank you, and I thank the ones who have joined us. I can see Elder Namusiule as well has joined us. Karibuni sana. I need to rush to Parliament. There's a 2:30 meeting, so please excuse me, but feel free to continue if you, it's by no means that we're closing the doors as such. We can always continue after me. So thank you, and thank you, Trevor, for always as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you all, in my sincere gratitude from the bottom of my heart, for taking part in this international webinar on the state of multi-party democracy in Kenya today. Whether there are legitimate concerns about the future, we know now there are, and I can assure you that I will also take that part of this conversation to the mainstream media, because the more we talk, the more we come up with solutions. It's at exactly 2 p.m., so you're allowed to leave at your own pleasure. My name is Trevor Mbija. Thank you so much for this vibrant discussion. I still continuing even on the charts. Asanteni sana to our international friends. Asanteni sana means thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah,